Hello, my fellow ETHStakers. I am Invetica.eth, and this is the Validator Workshop Series. Follow along as I set up and configure an Ethereum validator from scratch. Now, for non-technical users, this can be an incredibly intimidating experience, since running a validator requires a deposit of 32 ETH, which the current market value of that is roughly $54,000 as of today, and also requires the use of the command line. Now, for these reasons, we'll be using Sumer Esat's guides to set up and configure our validator. By utilizing the guides developed by Sumer, we'll be provided in-depth explanations of what we're building, along with the commands to easily copy and paste to the command line. Additionally, Sumer's guides are well maintained and updated to include steps to maintain your validator over time. Also, these guides have been funded by the Ethereum Foundation and are considered an industry standard. For this recording, we'll be deploying an Ethereum validator on the Pyrmont testnet. If this is your first time running a validator, it's good practice to start on a testnet for a few weeks to ensure you understand what it is you're doing and verify that the setup is working properly before deploying onto mainnet. Now, we are assuming that you have the necessary prerequisites for running your validator, specifically having already requested at least 33 Goerli ETH, opened up a MetaMask account, and have a dedicated machine for staking with a fresh installation of Ubuntu Desktop. If you don't, the video tutorial for those steps are linked in the description of this video. For this video tutorial, we'll be focusing specifically on configuring and running an Ethereum Geth node, generating and funding the validator keys, importing those keys to the ETH2 client, and finally installing and configuring the ETH2 client itself. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first thing we're going to do is create a bit of a workstation here for setting up our validator. So I'm going to open up a browser session, pull it over to the side here, and then pull up Sumer Esat's guide. Now this is specifically for the Lighthouse client. Now that we have that, I'm going to go over here, and then I'm just going to type the word term, and that will bring up the terminal session. Click on that. And then I'm going to open up the show applications icon in the bottom left hand corner and then type text to bring up a text editor. And these will be the three things that we'll use the most. All right, and one thing to note before we get too ahead of ourselves, all of the links and resources mentioned in this tutorial are all in the description of this video. So if you're following along in step with this guide, and you're not sure where we're getting the information from, just look at the description of this video and everything should be there. All right, so diving right into the guide for Nimbus on the Pyrmont testnet, let's go ahead and look at the first set of instructions that Sumer has outlined. Now, there's a lot of useful information in here, and again, this is sort of to set up a minimal viable product in that the only thing that we're worried about is looking at the instructions on setting up a validator node only. We're not going to go into security. We're not going to go into dashboards. We're simply looking at how do we spin up a validator. So with that in mind, we're just going to skip past step 0, which is connecting to the server remotely. That's no longer applicable to us since we are running locally. We are going to start with step 1 though and make sure that our system has been updated with the necessary operating system patches. So let's go ahead and copy and paste this into our command prompt. Now, for those of you who are not used to working in a command line, there's going to be a lot of copy and paste instructions in the guide here. Pay no attention to the $sign. We want to actually copy everything to the right of the $sign. We're not actually going to be copying and pasting the $sign. It's simply a representation of a new command. That's all. So let's copy and paste and hit enter. We'll enter our administrative password and watch that process. All right, looks like that has processed successfully. Let's go ahead and issue the second command. Simply just going to be copy and pasting. And it looks like that's complete too. Let's go ahead and clear our screen by typing the word clear and then hitting enter. And let's move on to the next step. Now for step 2, for securing the server, we're also going to ignore this step for right now. This goes outside of the scope of this tutorial, specifically configuring the firewall and allowing SSH access. That's something, if you're interested in doing, I highly recommend following these steps on your own time. So looking to the next steps here, we're going to open up the ports for ETH1 and ETH2 nodes. So let's go ahead and just copy and paste this command. This will open up port 30303 for Geth. And let's go ahead and open up port 9000 for Nimbus. Now there are instructions here for opening up ports for Grafana and Prometheus, which are dashboard and monitoring tools for your validator client. That is also outside of the scope of this tutorial. However, if it is something that you're looking to have as far as additional functionality, please feel free to follow these steps. All right, so the next step here is to configure the timekeeping. Let's go ahead and just issue this command. Everything looks correct. Let's go ahead and clear our screen again and hit enter. Now what we're going to do is install and run Go Ethereum, which is the ETH1 node. First thing we need to do is download the files. So let's go ahead and do that with this command. All right, looks like that's completed. So let's go ahead and update those files with the following update command. And finally, let's go ahead and actually install Geth with the install command. All right, looks like everything is processed correctly. So we've downloaded and installed Geth. Let's clear our screen. Before we start Geth, what we're going to do is create a background service so that once we run the ETH1 node, that we can continue working on the machine without it interrupting any services. So to do that, let's go ahead and make the appropriate user. We'll just copy and paste this command. We'll create a data directory for it to work out of, and we'll just copy and paste that. And finally, we'll set the appropriate permissions. Okay. Next, what we're going to do is actually create the system service to run in the background. We'll do that by running this command. You'll notice that it's going to open up a text editor. That's exactly what we want. And we're simply going to copy and paste the configuration file into our text editor here. And we're going to make some slight modifications for formatting's sake. And that looks good. Now what we're going to do to save this file, we're going to hit Control X. It's going to ask us, do we want to save? We'll hit Y, and then we'll hit Enter. Moving on to the next steps, we're going to reload the system daemon to apply the changes we had just made. And now let's go ahead and start Geth using the start command. Looks like that processed successfully. To verify, let's go ahead and run the status command. And it looks like we're up and running. We're green and active. Very good. So let's go ahead and hit Control C to exit the screen, and then hit clear and enter. Let's go ahead and move on to the next steps. And right now we're going to enable Geth, which allows the system to automatically reboot if and when your physical system reboots. Looks like that is processed successfully. Let's go ahead and take a look at the system logs for Geth. We're going to use the journal command here and take a peer into the system logs. And it looks like everything is running as expected. For right now, what's going to happen is the ETH1 node is going to search for the minimum amount of peers to connect to the network. Once it reaches that amount of peers, it'll start syncing with the blockchain. It needs time because there's years of data to go over. So let's go ahead and keep that running in the background. We will hit Control C and then type clear. Okay, now the next step is to generate our validator keys and deposit data. We're going to do this with the Deposit Cli file. And we're going to go ahead and follow the directions here. The first step is to make sure that we're in the home directory, And then what we're going to do is install curl. And curl is going to be used to download the Deposit Cli file. So let's go ahead and copy and paste the curl command real quick. Looks like that is completed successfully. Now let's go ahead and copy this entire curl command. And like stated before, this is going to directly download the Deposit Cli file. The Deposit Cli file is a command line based wizard essentially that is going to generate our seed phrase, our deposit file, and our key store file, all necessary in order to launch our validator. Looks like that completely downloaded. So let's go ahead and copy this command, which will unpack the files we just downloaded, and then run the next command, which is changing into the directory that we just unpacked. Very good. Let's go ahead and hit the clear button. Excuse me, let's type clear and then hit the enter button. Next, what we're going to do is actually run the Deposit Cli file. Next, what we're going to do is actually run the Deposit Cli program. To do that, we're going to copy and paste this command. But before we put it in our command line, let's paste it into our text file, because there's a variable that we need to change here, and that's the number of variables. Because there's a variable we need to change here, and that's the number of validators we're going to run. In our case, we're going to just change that to number 1. However, if you were to run multiple validators, say 2, 3, 4, whatever it is, you would just change the number there. I also want to point out the chain flag here, and you can clearly see that we're running on the Pyrmont testnet. If, for example, we were wanting to run on a different testnet or mainnet, you would simply change out the name of the network. Let's go ahead and copy this and paste it into our command line. And we can see that the Deposit Cli program is now running, and it's prompting us to create a password for our validator key stores. Let's go ahead and do that. It's going to ask us to confirm. Looks like it has accepted our password and has simultaneously generated our seed phrase. Let's go ahead and paste that into our text document. One quick note about this seed phrase: you would never, for any reason, share this seed phrase with anyone else. Effectively, who owns the seed phrase has rights to your validator and thus your ether, so please make sure that you keep this in a safe place. Let's go ahead and hit enter. And because this seed phrase is so important, the Deposit Cli is asking to confirm that we have in fact written it down correctly. Let's go ahead and paste that in. Looks like it is confirmed successfully, so now it's generating our key stores and deposit files. That is now completed, and it has put those files in this data directory. We're simply going to copy and paste that data directory into our text document, as we're going to reference that later. Let's go ahead and hit enter and then clear our screen. Moving on to the next steps, let's go ahead and change our directory to our home directory. And we're just going to remove the old tar file since we're no longer using it. And now what we're going to do is install the dependencies that Nimbus has. And we're just going to simply copy and paste this install file and then issue it on our command line. All right, looks like that's completed. Let's go ahead and clear our screen and move on to the next steps, which are to clone and build Nimbus. So let's first run this command, which is to ensure that we are running in the correct directory. And then what we're going to do is clone the Nimbus files using git clone. We're just going to copy and paste that command in our command line. Looks like that is completed downloading. Let's go ahead and change directories into the Nimbus directory. All right, next what we're going to do is compile everything we've downloaded with the following command. And let's just copy and paste that into our command line and hit enter. Now, depending on your hardware, this could actually take some time. So let's step away, take a break, stretch our legs, and come back in a couple minutes when this is completed. Okay, looks like that's completed successfully. Let's go ahead and move on to the rest of our instructions. So let's go ahead and copy all of these system files, issuing this command. It's going to ask us for our administrative password. We'll go ahead and put that in. All right, now it's time to import our validator keys. Let's go ahead and make the directory. And before we issue this second command, we're actually going to copy and paste it into our text document because there's two variables we need to adjust, and that is the username for our validator node. We can see here the Nimbus validator, that's the name of our server, and admin is the user account for that server. So we're just going to change that here and make that admin and admin. So let's copy and paste this command into our command line and hit enter. Now we want to make sure we have the correct permissions, so we'll run this command and verify that worked using the list command. Everything looks right. Okay, let's move on to the next steps. Let's just confirm that we are in the home directory, so let's do that with the change directory command --tilde. Next, let's change directories into the Nimbus ETH2 directory. Now before we issue this third command, let's copy and paste it into our text editor, because there's an additional variable that we need to change, and that is specifically stating where our validator keys are. Now, if you remember, we copied and pasted our validator key directory location, so we're just going to copy and paste that into this command and replace the validator key section here. All right, looks like that is complete. Let's go ahead and copy and paste that in. And what it's asking for here is the password that we generated during the Deposit Cli process. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, looks like the key store has been imported. Very good. Let's move on to the next steps. That is configuring the beacon node and validator. So we're going to go ahead, and this is just like the ETH1 node. So we're going to start by creating the user, creating the directory, and applying the correct permissions. And next, what we're going to do is create the actual configuration file. So we're going to run this command. It's going to open up the text editor. We're simply going to copy and paste the entire config file listed in the tutorial. And we're just going to do some brief formatting here. And we are all set. So to save this, we're going to do Control X. We'll hit Y to save and then enter. Next, what we want to do is reload the system daemon to apply the changes that we had just made. Let's go ahead and clear our screen. And now what we're going to do is start Nimbus. To verify that is in fact running, we'll run the status command. All right, look at that. Now we have a running Nimbus beacon node. So let's go ahead and do Control C to exit this screen, and then let's do clear and enter. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next steps. Now what we're going to do is run the enable command. This makes sure that if and when your server is rebooted, so too do the services. And let's go ahead and check the logs. So we're going to go ahead and run this command. This will give us a live preview into the Nimbus logs, and it looks like we are creating new log entries and waiting for the ETH1 node to sync. All right, so let's go ahead and do Control C to exit here, and then we'll clear our screen again and proceeding on to the next steps. Now what we're going to do is fund the validator keys. This is where we're actually making the deposit. So let's go into the Pyrmont Launchpad on Ethereum. And what we're going to do is click on the Become a Validator button. Now, for the sake of this demonstration, we're going to breeze through these screens fairly quickly. However, I can't stress this enough that if you are running a validator, and especially if you're running on mainnet, please make sure that you are reading through these screens and that you thoroughly understand the risks and responsibilities that go along with becoming a Ethereum node operator. Let's just go ahead and click through these now. Okay, here's a part where we need to actually put in our information. Again, for demonstration purposes, we're just running a single validator. However, if you were running more, you would put that number in here. The rest of these options can be left on the default settings, and then just make sure that you acknowledge that your mnemonic phrase or your seed phrase is securely written down. Now what we want to do is upload our deposit file. So what we're going to do is open up a file explorer. You'll see that in the left-hand side of the Ubuntu taskbar. And we're just going to drill down into the ETH2 deposit folder and then the validator keys folder. And here we'll see our two files that were generated by the Deposit Cli program, mainly the key store file and the deposit data file. And we're simply going to drop and drag into the website to process our deposit. And the green check mark means good to go. So let's go ahead and click continue. Now this is the actual deposit portion of the funding of your validator keys. So let's go ahead and click MetaMask. It's going to ask us to connect our wallet. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll confirm that we're connecting. And now we see that we're connected to the Launchpad. Let's go ahead and click continue. Now we have a summary. Yes, in fact, we are running one validator. Yes, we're depositing 32 Goerli ETH. And now let's acknowledge the risks and responsibilities associated by being a node operator and click continue. Now this is the actual deposit portion. So let's go ahead and click on confirm deposit. It will open up our MetaMask account. We are confirming that yes, we are depositing 32 Goerli ETH, and we are confirming again that we are in the Goerli testnet. So let's go ahead and make that deposit. Now just take a moment here for the transaction to complete. And there we go, we have a successful transaction. I'm gonna go ahead and open a new tab so we can look at that later. And that's it. You are now running your very own Ethereum validator node. Now, a couple items to note here. Again, the ETH1 node needs to properly sync, and then at which time your beacon node will start syncing, and then your validator will start picking up. Something also to note, if we go back to our browser here, let's maximize our browser window and go back to the deposit transaction. Now, one thing I want to point out here is the Beaconchain deposit section where you have your validator public key. This is literally your validator number. So if we click into that, we're going to see a couple things. First, we'll see the status of the deposit that we just made. And right now we're seeing that there's a bit of a wait. So in about 15 to 16 hours, we'll formally see that deposit process on the testnet. And the other thing we can do here is if we copy this address, next what we're going to do is go to the Pyrmont.Beaconchain address, and then let's just copy and paste our validator address in there. And now we can see the full status of where our validator is in relation to the test network. So we can see that our deposit has gone through, and now it's going to take, looks like around 15 hours for our validator to be processed into the network and be contributing attestations and proposing blocks. Now we did cover a lot of information in this tutorial. However, the steps accomplished today only represent a minimally functioning validator. I would highly recommend following all of the security steps in Sameer's guide. Additionally, if you do want to develop a dashboard to monitor your validator, please feel free to follow the instructions provided by Sameer, which are also in the guides. As always, if you run into any issues at all, the ETHStaker community is here to help. Our goal is to be welcoming first and knowledgeable second. There are no silly questions and no question too small. Simply ask and we'll do our best to help. For more in-depth and advanced features, make sure to check out our monthly ETHStaker Validator Workshops. Details on when those are will be hosted on our website at ETHStaker.cc. All right, that's it from me. I'm Envetica.eth, and we'll see you around.